Hey guys, Alex from Board Game Co over here, and it's time for another topic, another opinion, another discussion. One of those fun things where many of you will agree with me, many of you won't, and that's okay. This is always a part of it. This is always about the conversation. I like delving into these topics because they're interesting. A conversation in which we all agree is a waste of time. A conversation where we all disagree is too controversial and just unnecessary. But a conversation where there's nuance, a conversation where we can each learn from each other, where we can each take the middle ground on certain aspects or adjust our opinions, those are always where the interesting things lie. Now, to begin with, as a note, one of the reasons, while this particular video, which you've already seen the title, you've already seen community versus creators, and you clicked on it, what is this video about, what is it going to talk about, are you interested or are you not? But while this topic has been on my list for a while, I do want to make note that the reason I'm doing this video today is because the King of Average, who you should subscribe to, I'll get to him in a second, he discussed the fact that on Friday, today as well, he will be putting out his own video along these lines. And I didn't want to do my video before or after because I didn't want this to be a response at all. It's not meant to be a response to whatever he puts out. I know that he and I already agree on some things. I'm sure we will disagree on others, and that's fine. But I wanted to put out this video because I wanted to come at it with a clean slate as opposed to being some sort of counter, because my goal is not to counter. As far as the King of Average, he has a great channel. If you're not already subscribed, you should subscribe to his channel. At some point I will link to his video, but that might be an empty link until he actually puts out his video. But you should subscribe to King of Average. Great guy, great content, and coming at this hobby with some similarities to what I do, but also some differences. And that's, like I said, differences are helpful. They give us a full picture. Differences of opinions they can be very useful to not always be in an echo chamber. Now, because this is a board game channel, I'll put a board game box here, and we'll come back to this. We will talk about this board game box later, but really for the next however many minutes, you can just not tune out, but pay attention to something else. This is effectively a podcast. It's just going to be me talking to a camera. And the conversation today, like I said already, is community versus creators, about the idea of supporting people in this industry. And I talk a lot about Kickstarter videos, and so we often see from many of the comments down below, you keep talking about value, Alex. You keep talking about whether you should or shouldn't back it, whether it makes sense. What about supporting the publisher? Great, you should. By all means, support the publisher. If that's something in your goals, you should certainly support the publisher when it makes sense to do so. And we'll come back to that more towards the end of this video. But what about supporting the creators, the content creators in this hobby? And to be clear, I want to be very clear as a starting point, this is in no way meant to imply any lack of appreciation for all those that do. This opinion, this discussion is where we disagree and not where we agree. I am not talking to anyone who views, who likes, who comments, shares, subscribes, is a Patreon. I'm not commenting to any of that whatsoever. There is no lack of appreciation both for my own channel and all you guys, as well as any other content creator. There's not a lack of appreciation for the people that do support. But this is a conversation about those that don't, and we'll explain what that means. But the specific conversation here is not just reviewers, but rather paid previews. Paid previews in the board game world, where money enters this universe of people who talk about board games, and they also want to get some money out of that. And when I say get some money out of that, I mean a few things, because first of all, there's the obvious costs to being a board game reviewer. And by board game reviewer, I mean paid previews, reviewer, anyone who's in any way providing you with media about board games. There are inherent costs to doing so. There's the cost of equipment. I'm just barely into this, and I am on the lower end of equipment, and I'm still out over $1,000 of equipment when all is said and done. There's a lot to actually go into between cameras, mics, lighting, props, anything and everything, and you'll often go through several iterations as you try to slowly level up. At first, you get a $20 mic, then you have a little bit more of a subscriber base, and you start getting a $50 mic, and an $80 mic, and a $200 mic. You slowly start escalating what you do, but that also means you have to pay for things multiple times over. Then there's the cost of softwares. Anyone who's using any form of editing software, there are a bunch of costs, and on my end, as you guys know, I'm practically allergic to editing, and so my costs there are minimal, but there are still costs. There are costs, subscription costs, to the webcam recording platform I use whenever I do screencasts. There are all these different options in terms of the different softwares you buy. I do have an editing program, which I use very minimally, but I do use. There are programs that monthly subscriptions to the things you use to create thumbnails. Anything and everything. There are many costs, either one-time or subscription-based, to the various softwares any content creator is going to use. And additionally, and this is the elephant in the room, or the black sheep in the room or whatever, there's also time. Time is something that people don't talk about enough because they are afraid of the backlash. Watch anyone's Patreon video, watch them. They almost always exclusively focus on the peripheral costs of the equipment, going to a convention, all the peripheral costs, but they don't talk about their own time. Even in my own Patreon video, where I do talk about time, but I keep it to a minimal amount, I do focus on the others, I admit I also do that for fear of that backlash, for fear of the idea that how dare a content creator suggest to you that their time is something that is worth paying for. And you have no idea how much time goes into these videos. And again, I am on the lower end of this stuff because of my allergy to editing, because of how much I hate editing, because I specifically have chosen formats and content that rely on editing as little as possible. And I know I should still up my game in that department, but I do try to cater to my strengths and try to not rely on editing whenever I can get away with it. But even on my end, any video, you're talking about hours of time. If I do again, using me as a reference point, if I talk about a Kickstarter, there's a minimum of half an hour of research per Kickstarter, going through every aspect, going through the past projects, going through the shipping tables, the reviews, the videos, and then by a half an hour, I mean a half hour of dedicated research, followed by a good 2 hours of background videos on in the background from all the other people who did paid previews, who did any form of content, the publisher and any videos they have. Any Kickstarter video I have has a roughly half hour plus of actual research, and then again, another 2 hours or so of background research. And that's nothing. Pick anyone who actually edits their videos, pick any channel. I don't want to drag anyone into the conversation, so I'll avoid any names, but pick any content creator who does any form of editing, and at some point or another in their videos, they have talked about how much time it takes, how much time goes into editing a piece of video that you can consume, that you can enjoy. It is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of time, and that's completely ignoring the time spent in front of the camera. And that time is valuable. It is something that I'm not going to use the word deserves, because I don't believe in entitlement. I don't believe in entitlement at all. I believe that anyone who gets into this, anyone who decides, I want to talk about board games on camera, or on podcasts for that matter, anyone who decides they want to do that, they have signed up for whatever happens next. I don't believe in victimhood. I don't believe in entitlement. I don't believe that you get to do something that doesn't make sense and then make it someone else's problem to support them. I don't. But there's a difference between a lack of support and bashing people. If you don't want to be a Patreon, great. If you don't want to subscribe, like, view, comment, if you don't want to do whatever it is that supports a content creator, that is fine. I believe you should support people that you're getting value from, but that's your decision. That's completely your decision. The same way I back a Kickstarter when a Kickstarter has delivered value. When a Kickstarter creator sits there and gives me a product that I'm interested in, of course I back it. But if they don't deliver, if they don't offer a product that I don't think I'll care about, then I don't. Because I don't believe in the concept that someone can set themselves up such that you have to support them through charity. I believe in charity, to be very clear. But I separate the two. Business and charity are different. And if you set yourself up as a failing business, if you set yourself up as a business that relies on other people giving you their income, their business out of some form of guilt or trying to just make it work, I don't believe in that. But this video is not about the idea that you should sit there and be someone's Patreon. Again, by the way, good time to mention, I do have a Patreon. I have, I believe, 17 people as of right now. You guys are awesome. Anyone watching this video, you should go down below, click on my Patreon and become a Patreon, but this video is actually genuinely not meant to do that. I do feel I have to mention it, it's a good time, right? But that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is how much flack, how much garbage paid reviewers, not reviewers, sorry, paid previews get. I will agree 100% that no one should ever review a game for money. It introduces bias. But I also believe that bias should always be prevalent. Bias is always there if you are a half-decent human being. Because as a starting point, if someone pays you, whatever, I have no clue what the numbers are, but if someone pays you money to review a board game, I agree that it's going to be much harder to give a negative opinion, and that's assuming that your contract even allows for a negative opinion as opposed to specifically giving a review that is genuinely paid for. I mean, a positive review that's paid for. But even if they don't pay you, there's still bias. If they give you a game, there is bias as well if you're given a game. It is very hard. I have been on the receiving end of people already, publishers who want to send me a game to review it, but I'm like, it's not even about the money. It's I don't want to ever be in a situation where you asked me to be involved and now I have to trash your game. I do not want to have to do that at all. It makes me sick. The idea of dumping on someone's hard work when they asked me to effectively help them out. That makes me sick. And even if they didn't ask, again, this is a decent human being part. As a decent human being, you should feel bad whenever you have to critique someone else's work, energy, love, attention. You should feel bad. I'm not saying don't do it, by the way. Because the flip side is giving positive reviews to things that aren't good, you're also doing a disservice to your viewership. So there's guilt on either side. But it's why I generally feel much more comfortable dumping on an incredibly well-loved, well-liked game. Because I know how well-liked it is, so my opinion is just one data point. Versus when a game is not well-liked, when a game does not have critical support across the board, that's when I usually feel guilty. The fact that I don't like Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, who cares? That game is winning all kinds of awards. My opinion is just one opinion. But when you dump on a game that nobody heard of, now you can really be doing damage. And again, I don't mean don't give negative reviews. I just mean that bias is always at play. And in this Kickstarter world, we live in this world of paid previews. And the reason for that is because, let's define our expectations. Is our expectation that people creating content should just be doing so out of the goodness of their hearts? Out of their love for the hobby? You can expect that, don't get me wrong, I'm totally fine with you expecting that. But understand that if that were the only goal, if that were the only end product, then you're probably going to have a lower batch of quality to select from. You'll effectively be limited to people who are willing to put that energy, time, attention, and slave through it for nothing. So if you don't expect that, assuming, I don't know what you expect, maybe you do expect that. Maybe you're just like, hey, they love board games, it's a privilege to be in front of a camera. We're an audience, we're subscribed, we're viewing them, we're giving them attention, that's good enough. By the way, I really hope I don't lose subscribers over there. I really do like all of you guys. Please hit subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and hit subscribe, just to make up for the 2 people who do unsubscribe. And for the 2 of you who do unsubscribe, I'm really sorry. I do want your views, I do. But anyways, back to that. So what is it that how is it that a board game creator, not board game creator, a media creator, content creator, how do they get rewarded for their time? And it basically comes down to 4 different categories. And I'm basically just talking about money in this industry. There's money in content creation. It's just not a lot of money. And those 4 things are as follows. First of all, there's sponsorships. Then there's ad revenue. Then there's Patreon. And finally, publisher deals. And we'll go through each of those one at a time. So let's talk about sponsorships first. Sponsorships are when you jump onto a video and it says, hey, this content is brought to you by insert name here. It's pretty simple. It's someone who's supporting that channel, that content creator, by paying them money with the idea that they're getting eyeballs towards whatever it is that they're selling. Whether it's a board game store, by the way, Board Game Co., we are a board game store. We do. We technically sponsor ourselves in that sense. We don't get a lot of money from it, but we do technically sponsor ourselves. Sponsorships are a good reference point, but there's not a ton of money in it. Because at the end of the day, you have to rely on the people to go there and actually spend money. And most of the time, if you're in this business, most of the time spending money on Google AdWords is going to give you a much better return than spending a lot of money on sponsorship. There's not a lot of money. I mean, this video, this channel, Board Game Co., we get hundreds of thousands of views at this point. Thank you, by the way. I genuinely appreciate it. The growth has been tremendous, and it's really because you guys watch. But while we get hundreds of thousands of views, I believe I've gotten around $258.21 of Board Game Co. orders from that. At least from what Google Analytics tells me. Could be there's more, could be it's not tracking it right. But that's not a lot of money. That's really not a lot of money considering I put out a daily video and I've been doing this for 6 months. Then there's ad revenue. And the numbers there fluctuate greatly. And I'm going to use Dice Tower here. I know I said I wouldn't do names, but there's a reason I'm picking the Dice Tower here, for a reason. And this is all publicly available information on Social Blade. Go to socialblade.com, punch in a channel name, and you will see an estimation of how much money that channel makes in a year. And it's a big range, don't get me wrong. In the case of the Dice Tower, who is either the biggest or the second biggest, I can't recall if it's them or Shut Up and Sit Down, that are the biggest, most viewed channels in this space. And even them, at the height, at the peak, according to Social Blade, it estimates that they are making an ad revenue between 7.3 and 116,000. So between 7,000 and 116,000 a year for their videos from ad revenue. That might sound like a lot, but have you watched the Dice Tower? Are you aware of how many people they have working for them? How many people are on payroll? How many people this is a full-time thing for? $100,000 is not, even at the high end, by the way, and it's not always the high end. I would argue it's generally closer to the middle. It depends on how you do your ads, what goes on, but that really is a genuine range. If you see between 7 and 116, don't just assume it's 116. Often it's not. But even if it is, that is just not enough money to deal with the amount of people who are dealing with that channel day in and day out. Ad revenue is something, it can help, don't get me wrong, it certainly pads the various costs and expenses of doing this and time, and your time, but it's certainly not a ton of money. Next up, we have Patreon. Patreon, and by the way, if you are someone who's against paid previews, I think you should be a Patreon. If you're against the concept of people taking money from a publisher, from someone making a board game, then be a part of the solution here. Patreon can be helpful, and that really comes down to the audience. Different content creators make anywhere from $20 a month to, I think on the highest I've seen is $3,000. The highest. And again, $3,000 a month sounds like a lot, but that's, what is that, $36,000 a year for a full-time job as a reviewer? And that's the highest I've seen. Usually it doesn't go above a few hundred. Patreon comes down to how many people decide that they like your content enough that despite the fact that you are delivering it for free, they are still going to give you money every single month. Those people are awesome, by the way, just saying. And I say this as somebody who am not a Patreon enough myself. I'm not. I am a Patreon on some channels, but not many. And I understand the how hard it is to pay someone money for something they're already giving you for free. I have done it. I will continue to do it, but I understand it's very hard and I don't do it to enough channels. I subscribe to a lot of channels that I get a lot of value from, and I'm only a Patreon on a handful. So I get it. It is hard, but that is another source of revenue. And the last source of revenue is publishers, and this is the big one. And this is why we're having this conversation. Publishers is where the most of the money is. And when I say most, I still barely mean a living wage. Barely, if that. Publishers are effectively publishers paying you money to preview their game. Hopefully not paying you money to review your game. Everything I'm saying here has nothing to do with a paid review. If you are getting paid for a review, it's trickier. It is trickier. Just say, it's hard. I'm not going to sit there and cast labels, names, whatever. At the very least, you have to announce that you are paid to do so. But it's tricky. It is very, I don't want to sit there and overly judge someone for doing it. As long as they announce it, I guess I'm fine with it. Even if they're reviewing it. But paid previews for Kickstarter are where a lot of the money is. Because Kickstarters can make a lot of money, and if you get the right content creators to do a preview of your Kickstarter, that's fine. Now, I happen to not like previews as a personal preference. I watch them sometimes, especially because I do these Kickstarter videos, so I want as much information as possible. But that is where the money can be. Paying people who have a large audience, paying people to sit there and promote your game, it's basically advertising. That's what it is. And when they call it a preview, at least it's public and clear that it's an advertisement. So this whole concept of paid previews, paid reviews, while I don't like it to an extent, and when I say I don't like it, I don't like the content. But many people have a huge problem. I've seen it in the comments down below in my videos. I've seen it in other videos. Many people have a huge problem with the degree of paid previews that go on in the board game world. But what are you asking these content creators to do? Are you asking them to simply put out content for free? Are you asking them to rely on not enough sponsorship, if any, not enough ad revenue, if any, and not enough Patreon, if any? Paid previews are generally where you can actually pay for your time. And that is why, by the way, that is why so many content creators in the space are doing this part-time with barely any, like, it's like, okay, great, I'll put out a video here and there on my part-time, my free time when I can. Because you need a full-time job. You can't possibly survive on this. There's a handful of people in this space who are doing this full-time. A handful. Because how else? As a full-time job, you're supporting a family. How much money does it take? 50,000, 70,000, 100,000? Depends where you live. But even if you pick the lowest numbers, it is hard to get that much money in this space. It is very hard. And that's a reason there's a handful of people doing it. And you don't have to like their content. In fact, going back to what I said earlier, I am not a fan of simply watching someone you don't like or being a Patreon of someone you don't like. I'm not trying to say support people who you don't like. But you also don't have to attack them. You also don't have to dump on them. None of this means you should watch a video that isn't for you. None of this means that you should back a Kickstarter that isn't the right fit for you. But don't hate the creators that take money to make a living creating content that you enjoy. As for myself, I don't take money from anyone, but not because of any ethical standards or not. I just haven't migrated to that space, and I don't really plan on, don't get me wrong, but ultimately I'm going to do what makes sense for me. I'm going to do what makes sense for Board Game Co., for myself, to continue doing what I love. Now for myself, the reason I don't want to take money is because, it's not because of an ethical issue, it's just because I want to play to my strengths. And my strengths is, well, being passionate, giving my honest opinion. I would hate the idea of having to give a paid preview. Taking money, if I can do so in a way that doesn't compromise what I do here, I'm down for that. I haven't done it yet. And that, by the way, brings us to Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, which I reached out to Daily Magic Games because I like their games, and I was like, I want to actually play your game. I want to do something more than what I usually do. I want to play it before I give my opinion. But I'm not taking money. But it's still hard, by the way, because I have not played this yet. I'm going to be playing it in a few days. But I will be giving my honest opinion of how I feel about it, which is why it's so hard. It's so hard for me to even ask them for me to potentially trash their game. Potentially, hopefully not. It's even harder to say, can you pay me for the privilege of doing so? But if I can migrate into that space in a way that makes sense, of course I'm going to. Do you know how much time I do? These are daily videos. Daily videos with a ton of time. I love it, don't get me wrong. But it's still time. It's still time being put into this hobby. So for myself, and the reason I'm talking about this, because of the fact that I'm one of the few people, not one of the few, I shouldn't say that, because of the fact that I don't take any money from publishers, at least not yet, I am uniquely situated to defend those that do. I'm not biased. Although, like I said, I'm happy to move into that space if it makes sense to me at some point, so maybe I am biased. I don't know. I'm trying to develop relationships with publishers. I'm doing it slowly. So far, nothing paid. Anything I do that is paid, I will be transparent with you guys about. Completely 100%. And I don't plan on in any way migrating away from the way I do things. The question is whether there's a win-win, whether there's a way I can specifically cultivate relations. I don't know. Again, Daily Magic, I'm only reaching out to them because I generally like their games. So I'm hoping that a good track record of my own bias will help in being able to deliver a win-win. I would never want to do any kind of review or paid preview or getting a publisher copy of a game from a publisher and then having to trash it. That would be... It would hurt. It would hurt. I don't care how honest I'm supposed to be. It's not fun to sit there and be mean to people, even if in the greater good, better interest of whatever. So that's it. A bit of a ramble, like many of my videos, let's be honest. I hope you found something interesting in this video. I hope this in some way shed some sort of light of the reality of being a content creator in this space. And again, the goal here is in no way am I expecting anyone to do anything more than they are. But if you are someone who's ever trashed a reviewer, trashed a previewer, insinuated that they are beyond any honor because they've taken money to try to put bread on their table, to try to actually be in the space, if you're someone who's done that, then I'm asking you to do less than you were. Be nicer to people. Understand where they're coming from. See what's going on. I do agree transparency is key. To be very clear, as always, I don't give free passes, but I do try to shed a light on the other side of the conversation. As always, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. You can expect a unpaid review / Kickstarter should you back it on Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria at some point in the next day or two. If you enjoy this content, subscribe, like, comment, let me know your opinion. Be a part of the conversation. It is, again, this is my opinion. This is a starting point. This is a baseline, but be a part of the conversation. I have changed my mind before. I have adjusted my opinion before, and I hopefully will again. At the end of the day, we're all learning together. Until next time, I am Alex from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed. My Patreon link is below, and have a good one.